You're listening to the Business Consulting Buzz podcast at www.consulting-business.com. Hi everyone, it's Michael Zapersky from Business Consulting Buzz. Today on the line I have Don Green, who is the Executive Director of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Many of you, if not most of you, I hope know about Napoleon Hill and his books and teachings, including the bestseller Think and Grow Rich. Don became CEO of a bank at the age of 41 and made it a very profitable success. He speaks around the world and has been featured by the UN Forum for the importance of entrepreneurship within the local economy. Don, I'm very pleased to have you with us, and a big welcome to you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very pleased to be able to speak to you. I appreciate you reviewing my book and what you have to say about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, Don, we're going to get into some specific principles and tips that our listeners can apply to become more successful in a few minutes. But first, I noticed as I read your book that you've made studying other successful people a deliberate part of your life. You haven't just read, a few biographies or a couple of self-help books. You really, got into it in a very big way and made it seems a big part of your life. And I want to ask you, why is it so important to study others the way that you do?
Well, I think we learn from others. I remember Queen Elizabeth's remark that even monkeys can learn from other monkeys. And so, by studying successful people, we can repeat what they do and also studying unsuccessful people and don't do what they did. So we don't live long enough to make all the mistakes. So we have a chance to learn from other people. You can do a lot by trial and error, but you can also learn a lot from simply repeating what other people's done.
And, personally, what do you get out of it? Because reading is one thing, but application is a whole other thing. So in your case, from studying all these, is it hundreds or I'm not sure how many you read, but it seems like, quite a few biographies and you read a lot and studied a lot about successful people. So what have you specifically gotten out of it?
Well, I've actually, I don't mean to brag, but I've read more than 1,000. What I got out of it was I learned to read it and see where can I apply this information, how can this affect me? We read a lot of material like novels to find out what the story ends in is, and if the boy got the girl or if he inherited all the money, but we have to read the end. But if we're looking at a biography or a self-help book, as we see these principles, we can basically write our own story. We can write our own thing by application. And that's the secret of it. You can read and read and read and read, but you should be making notes in the margin and making notes and going back to the material. And for example, for a long, long time, I get up in the morning, I'd read 10 pages in Think and Grow Rich. Well, in less than a month, you've read a book again. So if you do that for a year, you've read it more than a dozen times. And because the first reading, I guess we learn our ABCs or multiplication tables by repeating. And so I know by rereading it, I see stuff. For example, the story of 3 feet from gold. When the economy turned down 3-4 years ago, I thought, gosh, that would make a good book. It's simply a story on persistence. So that's how the book got started, 3 feet from gold, which was a bestseller and which is still selling well.
Right.
So we get material, if we think and use our imagination, that we can use in our own life.
You've been very successful. I mentioned one highlight here that you are the CEO of a bank at the age of 41, but I know from reading your book that you've been involved in real estate investing, several other businesses, and now with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. So you've reached a level of success. I know people define success in different ways in their own lives, but clearly you've been very successful. So why do you continue to read more about other successful people when you've already achieved success?
Well, learning is a lifelong process. I read one of Peter Lynch's book on investing. He said, earn while you learn, or learn while you earn, which one would say it. And so it's a never ending process that we pick up. Someone the other day said something about stock, and I said, I don't tell people what to invest in. But if you read the news, you would know AT&T and Verizon practically have all the phones in the United States, and they pay excess of a 4% dividend. So you don't have to be a genius, but you either had to pick that up in the news or you had to read it somewhere or another to know facts like that. And so I keep on doing it to see what I can learn. Just like right now, what you're doing, the social media, I mean, it's turned book publishing and so forth completely around. And I'm not up on it. I'm trying to learn. I'm probably up to 1% or maybe 2%, but I've got a lot to learn on the social media as far as doing the work that we want to do with the foundation.
Right. I guess what's interesting is you could be sitting on a beach right now, Don, probably anywhere in the world, sipping a cold drink and taking in the sunshine. But it seems like you're still very active in business, through the foundation, giving talks. Why haven't you just kind of taken the retirement that you've deserved?
Retirement, I think, is preparing for an early death. I truly love what I do every day. And I get to travel which is all I'd do if I was so-called retired. But, I've been to California twice this year. I'm going again Saturday. And, I've been to Malaysia 3 times and China 3 times, Germany a couple times. I've traveled a lot in the position I hold. And so I would be doing something or other. I'm on the board in West Virginia for 15 years, I guess. And I'm on the hospital board probably for 25 years. I'd still be doing those things. And, as long as my health, would allow me to do it. But Michael, I could tell you some stories. Some of the young people that work for me. One little young lady worked 6 years. She was, valedictorian in high school. She made 1 B in her whole life, and that was in a 1-hour lab class. And she just started with a major hospital as a pharmacist. And the satisfaction of that, it's just kind of hard to explain it. Nothing in it for me except the satisfaction of knowing that you had a little bit maybe to contribute along the way. And we have a chance to make a difference in other people's lives. And even like the book I wrote, I got one guy who I met and he had bought 3 copies of the book. And he sent me a money order for $1,000. He said, just in appreciation. And I had a lady that bought it on Amazon from Oregon who I didn't know. And she said she was so inspired. She sat up and read the book and she sent a $500 check. And of course, all of that money is for the foundation. There's nothing in it for me except satisfaction that we add to the scholarships that we do for the young people.
Yeah, that's great. Don, I think the so-called self-help industry in some ways faces a bit of a stigma. I've heard many people talk about all the information being the same, and some people call it kind of warm and fuzzy and that it's not accurate, for lack of a better word. I think when you talk about, putting together a treasure map or writing down where you want to be in 1 year and putting it on your bathroom mirror, people, that doesn't jive with everyone. So what would you say to those skeptics?
Well, it's work for other people. And I think one of the ingredients is first was having a purpose. Most people are like tumbleweeds. They're just wondering. They don't know from one day to the next what they really want. And till they decide what their passion is, what their purpose is, and develop a belief system, they simply are not going to put the effort out necessary to be successful. And of course, each one of us has to determine what our definition of success is. And a lot of people will think it's money. Well, I think if we're remembered, it'll be for what we gave and not for what we got. Because believe me, most people don't care what kind of car you drive or how much money you got. But if you contributed to mankind in some shape, form, or fashion, I think that's what you'll be remembered for. And I think the steps in life are first we go through a learning, which is continuous, and we earn, which is continuous. But also we should be striving to some point in time to reach a place where we're sharing. And I think that's what makes life complete, when we're in a position to share with other people. Right.
And I've heard so many successful people say that the most rewarding thing for them, or the time where they feel best and that they've really achieved the most, isn't when they're looking at the dollar signs in their bank account or the items that they've, their assets that they've accumulated, but really when they're able to help other people and help to, build a community or help others prosper or, all that kind of stuff that you're mentioning right now. And I continue to hear that over and over again.
Well, you talk about the self-help thing, the stigma. I think some of it's caused by overzealous promoters. I don't know about other people, but I'm not impressed with someone who says they live in a $5 million house. It may be necessary for some people, but I don't see the point in telling it to people who are striving to get by. I don't think it impresses no one, maybe the speaker himself, because unless you're Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, everybody's got more than you have.
Right.
So, I got friends that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but I think they behave real well, and they gave back, and they gave back and give back. So the self-help industry, I think, maybe a little bit overdone in some shape, form, or fashion, like guys doing an info commercial trying to sell a Think and Grow Rich for $100 or something other, because the publishers left out 2 important pages, and which it weren't by the author anyway. So we put those 2 pages on free for people when they can buy paperback for $5.95, and we just don't want to be a part of things like that.
Definitely. And one thing I really appreciate about your book is that in a lot of books, you dig for those gems, and even if you find a couple in a book, it's well worth the investment and the time, if you can apply those to your own life and to your business. But in your book, which is called Everything I Know About Success I Learned from Napoleon Hill, it was almost every page as I was turning, I was getting some insight or something that made me kind of laugh or smile or think about things in a different way. And you wrote it in such a way that there's so many stories that it's very easy to digest. It's not a dry kind of personal development, self-help type of book in any fashion. It really is more of a story. That's the way I interpreted it, or several stories that teach these principles. And so with that, what I'd like to do now, Don, is to get into some specific ideas for success from your book. And the first is, you said, with discipline we make our habits, then our habits make us. What do you mean by that? Well,
it's very important. There's a little book I read, which has sold 1 million copies, well on the copyright too, called Your Greatest Power, POWR, by a psychologist. And we make choices. In other words, this morning, each one of us got up, kind of planning, at least mentally, what we was going to do for today. And of course, that could be getting some drugs or sitting and watch TV all day, or we could be planning meetings, who we're going to meet with, our work lined out, what phone calls we're going to make, what interviews you're going to set up, and so forth. Or we could say, well, I want loaf all day, or watch sports programs, or so forth and so forth. And that's where that comes from, is we make our habits, and then our habits make us. But the thing of it is, Michael, it doesn't matter whether they're good habits or bad habits. I had an uncle one time, they said he was in his 80s. He lit up a cigarette in church, and that's when he decided it was time to quit, because it's just a habit. Things get quiet, or I guess the body gives you an urge or ever what, and you just reach for that pack and light it up. And that's what happens with so many people. I think I told the story of J. Paul Getty, of how he quit smoking. He said he realized waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning to put his clothes on to go out to get cigarettes during a thunderstorm, that something said to him, well, Paul, you don't have the habit. The habit's got you. And he said that's when he took his clothes off, got back into bed, and never smoked again. But we don't realize those little things that we do repeatedly over and over and over till, I've heard people say they can quit smoking, or they can quit drinking, or ever what. But they tell themselves that 1,000 times, but yet they never get around to doing it.
Right. And so the best way to make that happen, any habit that we want to create in our life, what you're saying is really just to start doing it and repeat it, make it a habit, and that will you'll get the result you're looking for.
Well, it's like, getting up 30 minutes early and reading 30 minutes in a good book, or reading 30 minutes before you go go to bed of a night, and or taking notes down when you run across ideas and so forth. I can tell you. One night I wrote out a thing and I sent to, next morning I went to the bank. Wasn't seeking something or other, but I wrote the foundation in Chicago and told them what I was doing, and they sent me a letter back and asked me to come have dinner with the trustees, and that turned into the job that I got today, and I've been doing this for 13 years after 38 years in banking. So it's some of those things as a habits. May not have immediate results, but somewhere down the line, we get the results of the habits that we've involved ourselves in.
Right. Don, in a person's pursuit of success, how big a factor is fear? I mean, you talked about a study where 60 to 70% of the things we all spend time worrying about never happen. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it's not in my book, but I remember watching a little piece early one morning when I was watching the news, and it was a little film clip of this old lady over in Tennessee, and she said that when she worried, she went to the garden with her hoe, and said when she hoed in her garden, she said she couldn't hoe and worry at the same time. What she probably didn't realize, but it meant taking action. Our mind is complicated, but it's also simple in the fact that it cannot hold positive and negative thoughts at the same time. And I remember our chairman of the board was W. Clement Stone. I remember him saying that when we have fear, we can't think it out. We can't reason it out. But he said we can take action and replace it with, for example, if you're watching something scary on television, you can cut it off, and it will remain in your subconscious, in your mind, what you saw on television. Mm-hmm. All you have to do to get rid of that is not cut the television off, but simply put it on another channel and watch a Western or watch a sports program or watch something other else. And that's what he meant, was that you can't sit still and reason in what it is, but you can take action and do something else to replace that fear you have.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So rather than just kind of letting that negative thought, whether it's fear related or otherwise, sit in there, the best way to move around that, to get to a place that's more positive and more beneficial, would be to focus on something that is positive and actually, as you're saying, change the channel per se. Absolutely.
Fear either mobilizes us and or freezes us or causes us to move, and we can make the choice which one we want to do, where we want to move or just freeze. And there's nobody that doesn't have fears, but you can't just reason them out. You got to do something or another.
Right. Don, we touched, or you were mentioning, touching on this a little bit earlier, but one thing I wanted to ask you is that you talk about everyone needing to have a purpose and know what that is in order to be a success in life. I think there's going to be some people listening, today thinking, that sounds great and it makes sense, but I don't know what my purpose is. What would you tell them? I mean, how can people actually go about finding their purpose?
Well, I think sometimes they can go back to even their childhood and think of what they enjoy doing. You've got to have something or other that you can enjoy doing. So many people pursue something other than they says, I'm going to make a lot of money. Well, if you have a phobia about blood, you probably wouldn't make a good nurse. Or if you don't like personal contact with people, you might not. So you got to find something other that you enjoy doing. And pursue it, because having something that you enjoy doing is where that saying comes in. If you enjoy what you're doing, just like what you're doing, if you enjoy what you're doing, you don't look at it as work. And we, most of the time, when we get tired, we're simply bored. Now realize that some jobs are physical, like laying bricks or doing manual labor, you can get physically tired. But if you work in an office and you're tired, more than likely, you're just mentally bored and not enjoying what you're doing. And I told someone on success, if you got a purpose or something you can develop a passion for, you go to bed with it and sleep with it and wake up with it and have your meals with it, and you stick with it, you're going to be a success. but you got to find out something other that you're going to enjoy doing. And you might want to play football or basketball and realize you don't have the physical attributes, but that doesn't mean you can't be a ticket seller, or if you get enough money like Mark Cuban, you can end up buying a professional team. You can still be associated with it in a different manner.
Right. Is there any exercise or specific process that you would suggest people follow in order to discover, kind of some hints around what their passions might be? I know you said to consider, what they were interested in when they're going back to their childhood or early days. But is there anything else for someone that maybe, enjoyed playing sports and did a lot of that, but didn't necessarily, continue that for a long time and doesn't have a clear idea of what they're passionate about? Maybe they're passionate about their family, and, they enjoy exercise. But beyond that, if that person doesn't have a very clear, idea of what they're passionate about, what would you suggest that they do?
Well, I would think, I have a neighbor who's, pretty well off, and he's got 2 kids, one of them in medical school, and the other one, the boy, he just likes to clean cars, and he's not decided on what he's going to do. And I saw him one day, and he's cleaning the car, and I said, "Ern, you really like that, don't you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "But you can make a lot of money doing that." And he said, "How?" I said, "Well, start off with that. I know you go to church out there. Just pass the word. You'll detail a car for $100 or what you think it is, and the word of mouth will do it." I said, "Because you have to do what you like to do. And if it's involving cars, maybe a car dealership or sell cars or repair cars or whatever, if you find out the area that you like, and if it's physical exercise, as a guy that owns the Gainesville Fitness Club, he was just absorbed by that, and he's absorbed by Napoleon Hill, and he's got one of the finer health club fitness centers in the country, because that was his passion, and he'd read the books, and he said, "Well, how can I develop this into a business?" And that's what he's done. And, the stores there's a million of them. I remember Debbie Fields cookies. She loved to make cookies, and she didn't like her mother's cooking. And, she had a passion for cooking. And she stuck with the cookie thing till she sold out for a few $1 million. But the main thing is she enjoyed what she was doing, and then the enjoyment turned into a business. And I think that's where we got to start from, something that we have a passion and we enjoy doing, and just pursue it.
I think that's great advice. I really liked your writing regarding dealing with failure, because you said, look at each attempt that you complete not as a failure, but as an education. Don, were you always able to look at things like this?
Yeah, sometimes it might have lasted for a few minutes, but I learned being funny. I can remember once, I love art, and I bought some art, and I did real well, and I thought, God, this is simple. I buy something other and made, got several hundred times as much as back. That's what I gave for it. I said, and I sold a piece of Sotheby's, and I said, get your name in the catalog, and I said, nothing to it. So I attended one large event, and I shipped about 10 paintings. I had a bunch of Russian art to a major dealer in the Washington, D.C. area, actually over on the Maryland side. And I went up and attended the event. And this art of mine comes up and starts selling. It starts selling somewhat for less than what I gave for it. And I thought, oh, my God, the contract, I never thought about putting a minimum in there, and it comes back to me if it doesn't reach a certain figure. But at first I didn't like it for a couple of minutes, and I thought, boy, you learned something on this one. Because all I would have had to done is just recognize it, that because everything I'd bought in the past and sold, I wasn't doing it for money, I was just doing it for the enjoyment. That I just assumed that anything I sold that I'd bought, I was going to make a lot of money on it. And here, all of a sudden, this Russian art, it's not happening. And I could have prevented that, and I learned from it. I still sold stuff, but I would determine I wanted every how many $1,000 for it, and that would be the minimum selling price. If it didn't sell, it come back to me. And not only did it sell for less than what I had in it, I had to pay a 15% commission on it, which was putting salt in the wounds. But it was a lesson. I could have quit dealing art, quit selling anything, but it was nobody's fault but my own. But I said, well, that's a lesson. And that was the only way to look at it, because it didn't mean I quit. It just meant the next time I give a major art auctioneer, my art, I put a minimum on each piece that I want it to bring. If it don't, it gets shipped back to me. So that was just a lesson learned, because so many people use it as a reason to quit, and then they tell themselves, well, my spouse or so-and-so said it wouldn't work. I ought to know better, and what have you, rather than sticking with it or changing plans or going and getting somebody's assistance that knows what's involved on the thing. And he'll emphasize that if you have a purpose, make plans. They don't even have to be really good plans or perfect plans, but you have to have a purpose and a plan and start. You can always, it's like you and I traveling across the country. We might miss a cutoff on the interstate, what have you, but that don't mean we turn around and go back home. We look and see where we went wrong and correct our path and keep on going.
Right. Yeah, I think those are some great examples and stories there. So Don, for my final question for today is that you've met with and studied thousands of successful people around the world. And I would imagine that there are some characteristics these people share. I mean, while, probably others that they don't. But if people were only able to choose 2 or 3 characteristics or ways of living or beliefs, which 2 or 3 would you suggest as being most beneficial in reaching success?
I think after having known what you're going to do, is I call it going the extra mile and develop a faith or a belief. Michael, you've heard people say, well, I believe it when I see it. Well, they got it backwards. You got to see it first. And when I mean see it, I mean that's with their inner eyes. You can call it a vision, but it's seeing it with their inner eyes, where we want to be and not where we are. Today is we think and see a vision of where we want to be a year or 2 years or 5 years. And if we have that vision and we believe it's strong enough, take the plans and we persist and follow them, then we will become what our vision was today. And I think that's very important. But you can't get away from the belief system, and you can't get away from going the extra mile, because going the extra mile, it separates you from the other people. I said, there's more room at the top of the ladder than there are at the bottom, because at the bottom, you've got all these people just trying to get by, and they're tromping on each other. They're stepping on each other. But if you do a little bit extra, it'll separate you from the crowd.
And doing a little bit of extra, what does that usually involve in your mind? I mean, how can people go that little bit of extra? Is that kind of giving, above and beyond service? Or is that providing more product or more value, or what's the best way to do that?
All of the above. I mean, it applies to simple things like a waitress or a waiter in a restaurant. It's noticing the little things. Is the customer's glass empty? He shouldn't have to track someone down to have his drink refilled, and providing them napkins and going back and checking on the table and says, everything okay? Anything I can get you, and so forth. It's the little bitty things, but they add up over a period of time. And I had one of my mentors tell me that doing a little bit extra one day, nobody would probably notice. You may do it for a week and nobody notice it, but he said if you do it over a lifetime, you'll be the success that most people are only going to dream about.
Right. Well said. Well said. Well, Don, thank you so much for doing this, getting on the call today and being on the show. I really do appreciate it. It's been great speaking with you, and your book, Everything I Know About Success I Learned from Napoleon Hill, was one of the best reads I've had in a while, and I would highly recommend it to everyone, because there's so many lessons within this that I think everyone can benefit from in one way or another. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you very much. And if I can ever help you, please let me know.
Will do. Thanks, Don. For more interviews, articles, and resources on consulting, visit Business Consulting Buzz at www.consulting-business.com.